Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Last domestic thing that ties into this transition, ties in, remember I said, usually in national security, you have a continuity practice where you keep in place the national security political appointees, and we're talking Secretary of State, Secretary of the Services, Director, of the CIA, all of these individuals you keep in place because you want to make sure that someone's watching the store. And what caused concern a week ago, I think Monday, is there was a purge that happened in the Department of Defense, and there's been a lot of speculation about this purge. And I wanted to add my 2 cents. I don't have any specific knowledge on this. I only have awareness of sort of how things work and what smells right and what doesn't smell right. So what happened is, in a series of days, the Secretary of Defense, Esper, was fired by tweet, of course, because that's what 2020 is. His chief of staff resigned, which is, if your secretary goes, your chief of staff goes. That's not all that common. But then a gentleman named Anders, who is the undersecretary of policy, got canned. And what happened is Trump filled these spots with sort of Trump loyalists, and some of them have special forces background. And right immediately, the first thing internet, social media did, because it's the first thing social media always does, is panic. And they're like, oh, the coup is coming, the coup is coming. And let's dispense that right up front. For anyone watching from the FBI or NSA, I am not planning an insurgency against the current United States government at this time. So, what I'm about to say is just, let's say, hypothetical scenarios. If I were to advise someone on who you want to get on your side for a coup from the military, it's not OSD policy. These guys are like the brain think tank nerd trust of the DOD. They're people like me, perhaps with a haircut, maybe wearing a suit, but they're thinking strategy, they're thinking policy, they're trying to think over the horizon, they're looking at the global posture and our relationship with countries. These are not the people who are going to pick up and squeeze triggers and drop and stack bodies, right? These are policy analysts, and they come up with far-reaching strategy and, all that good stuff, thought leadership and vision. That's basically their job. So it's important, but they're not going to instigate the coup. They're not going to be the ones. If in the military, if you wanted to, who do you need on your side to run a coup? You want the Joint Chiefs of Staff, maybe the combatant commanders like U.S. Northcom, that's the combatant command for North America, or even FORCECOM, the U.S. Army FORCECOM. These are people who have access to bodies in a chain of command that are located in the United States. Those are the people you want. I've been keeping a very close eye on those military leaders to see if there's been any changes, or because that would be much more serious. I would be much more concerned if I saw a chief of staff, general fired, or combatant commander changed, or something like that. Because remember, Esper was not the only one who pushed back against Trump on the Insurrection Act in June. As I documented, every single chief of staff and the senior NCOs signed similar letters. So if Trump wanted to, say, invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy troops as some sort of coup scenario, he'd have to go through a wall of resistance. And to do that, he'd have to fire them and replace them. And so that's where I'm keeping an eye out. Now, I wouldn't even go to the DOD if I were Trump, because he's not well liked. I mean, some people like him. There's obviously some support among veterans. But if you want Trump supporters who have guns, go to the Department of Homeland Security. That's where the agency is, that has lots of people all in the U.S. They probably swing more to Trump than they do for Biden. But even so, the DHS is not nearly big enough. You saw this in Portland over the summer, where DHS deployed basically the entirety of its special forces complement, pulling in from marshals and border patrol and all these different groups, hostage answer, and it stretched their capability to deploy a few hundred people for a sustained period in one city. Now, you may say, well, they have thousands of troops. Yeah, but you'd have to pull them off the border. You'd have to pull them in. It's just, I don't see coup in the cards. I hate to burst the bubble of the doomsayers who are living for the worst case scenario. I don't see it. If I see something change, I'll be sure to let you know as I'm heading across the border. I'm just kidding. I'll let you know in advance. I'm not going anywhere. But so what are the other scenarios? What is the likely cause of this? Okay, there's petulance, right? Maybe he just wants to tweak somebody that has irritated him. He's going to fire him because he's thinking that Esper is going to get less speech opportunities if he has fired on his resume on LinkedIn rather than resigned. Maybe that's plausible, certainly within the realm of possibility. Maybe it's temper tantrum. That's one thing, but that's not very fun. That's kind of like, okay, that's Trump. But there's three other theories that have come out, one of which I think is the most likely. So one theory has to do with a military strike abroad. And there's two targets I've heard discussed. One is a strike on Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the other is a strike in Iran. These are all being discussed in the news with the Iranian nuclear sites, that either Trump wanted to directly strike them or allow Israel to strike and then provide protection for Israel. Let's go through that one first. That one has been reported that there was active conversations where Trump was asking, can I do this? Because it's in amidst all this domestic uncertainty, as I've been saying all along, the world continues to move, and Iran, after Trump stomped on the treaty with Iran, I'm in an interesting place. I'm not a fan of the nuclear deal with Iran as Obama put it in place. So I didn't like it. But the way in which it was removed and nothing was put in place after it left this vacuum that Iran has now began testing it over years, where they've been incrementally ratcheting up to see what they can get away with, and they're now stockpiling more nuclear materials, far less than they had before, but a lot more they had than when we got rid of the treaty. And so there's talk about a nuclear or strike on their nuclear facilities. Trump was talked down, and the people who are going to talk him down are going to be Esper, and policy is going to have it. But really, it's again the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the combatant commanders. You don't need to fire policy to do that. So that's still, I think that's less likely. The two ones that are leading contenders is the UAE, United Arab Emirates, had, when they did the Abraham Accords in a couple months ago, Jared Kushner's over there in the Middle East trying to negotiate some sort of permanent normalization ties with Israel. UAE comes out, says they're going to normalize ties with Israel. Part of that deal is a $23 billion weapons sale from the US to the UAE. And of course, first thing you always say is follow the money. This is the money, right? This is the theory where the money lines up with the actions. And that weapons deal is exactly who you would need approval from, the Secretary of Defense and somebody in policy. Because policy is the group that would say, USDA-TNL, Acquisitions, Technology, and Logistics, those are the folks who would coordinate the weapons sale. But it's the policy, OSD policy is the group that would say, we do not want to sell weapons to UAE because we fear them proliferating out from there, or they may be a future competitor. We don't trust them, or if we do that, we lose credibility with this ally over here. They are exactly the kind of people who do that kind of mental analysis math and would say, no, we're going to block the sale of weapons to UAE. And in fact, the day or two after Esper and this other gentleman get fired, Anders get fired and replaced, Trump announces the $23 billion weapon sales to the UAE. So follow the money. That's one theory. That's a certainly plausible theory. My theory, because it's a little bit more personal, it's not follow the money, it's follow the grievance. And what this has to do is with going all the way back to the 2016 election and the the Russian interference in the 2016 election. President Trump, as I understand it, has got it in his head that there is intelligence out there that would vindicate him as being not guilty, that this is a smoking gun of his innocence. Now, seeing what Trump releases after the whistleblower, the Ukraine whistleblower, he says, hey, look, I'm not guilty. I'm not so sure that evidence is what he thinks it is, but let's just say there's evidence out there that is speaks to some element of the Russian interference in the US election. That evidence is extremely highly classified. Both the CIA Director Haspel and the Secretary of Defense Esper have come out against declassifying that evidence because it would risk the means and methods of which it was meant to obtain it. Now, I have no idea what this is, but you can kind of imagine if you have direct evidence of like that, you may be talking about an agent highly placed in sensitive areas. You may be talking about a backdoor in their computer systems where you can literally go in and watch. I kind of speculated when the hacks happened that one reason we knew it was Russia hacking is because we were watching them report doing it from within inside their own systems. These are types of intelligence that you don't want to just surrender to make a point. And the argument that has gone on is apparently Trump and Trump loyalists against this national security establishment saying, we do not want to surrender these methods. We still need them. We don't want to burn them. And it comes to a head. And if this theory is right, he can't just get away with firing Esper. He's also got to take out CIA Director Haspel. And that's why there's kind of like a Twitter watch on Haspel to see if she gets fired by tweet. She's the CIA director. She would have to agree to this as well. And she's been pushing back very hard. And again, this is something when it comes to declassification of intelligence, means, methods. There's obviously a USDI, a specific undersecretary of the Department of Defense in charge of intelligence. But again, policy is the think tank. Policy would play a role here. They'd be able to say, you know, bad idea and stand on it, as well as the Secretary of Defense. So my theory, going on Trump's personality, is this guy can hold a grievance to the nth degree like nobody's business. And he will step on a $10 bill to pick up a penny. And in this case, he is still angry about the allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 election. And he still thinks that if he can produce some evidence, he will be redeemed. I don't know why he cares. His supporters don't believe it. So the people he looks to don't believe it anyway. The people who do believe it aren't going to be convinced by anything this guy produces. So it's kind of like, I'm not sure, but it does fit in Trump's personality and sort of paradigm to do something like that. And to be able to do it, he'd have to fire some people who are standing in his way. So that's my theory. But this is, you know, all of these things could be partially true. It could be part petulance, they're blocking the arms deal, and they're standing in the way of declassification. It doesn't have to be one for one, but it's that's my theory anyway. So I don't, you know, this purge of the national security, it's not good, especially with the block of the transition, but I don't think it's a leading signal for a coup or any, I mean, I want to get to something like, you know, it's never World War III and it's never a coup. Let's put that out there. But some final comments here. Mike Morrison and Jay talking about crayons, the National Strategic Stockpile of crayon. You know, it's always green. He's got to talk to those planners and get more green. Maybe Ben Carson is hiding a military unit under the grain in the pyramids. I don't think Ben Carson's doing well. He's symptomatic and sick. By the way, in all this, there was another COVID outbreak at the White House. Ben Carson's positive and symptomatic. Yeah. Mike Morrison, always follow the money. Grievance can be soothed by more money or things money can provide. That's good. So money, this is why, and my mental model with Trump's lawsuits, follow the money. He's fundraising on it. He's making money on it. That money goes in his pocket. Why is he purging the national security? Follow the money. He wants to get in a weapons deal with UAE, who can certainly make good on anything he needs down the road through any of a number of systems. And do we need to, here's a question, do we need to worry about Trump spilling state secrets after he's out of office? Yeah. I mean, if he can remember them, sure. He's been able to blunder his way into some very sensitive materials disclosure. There was one in Syria when he was talking to Russian high levels officials or president. He has this need to brag. Whether he remembers it, like you watch this guy, if he were an evil mastermind, there's a lot more damage he could do, but he's just kind of all over the map with his sort of attention and what he's doing. So I think he's often much more consumed with the personal grievance, the petty revenge, and tweeting nasty things out. Now, by accident, he may release something, or he may decide to release something just out of pure spite. But that's a risk of any president, and there's not much that can be done. I mean, you can. He's got, as long as he is president, this is one of the things people have to remember, until he is no longer president on Inauguration Day, noon, January 21, something, he can declassify anything. Like, he can literally say, I will declassify this and I am approving this. Right now, these blocks that I'm talking about, it's not like Esper has the legal authority to stop the president, but it would look really, really bad if the Department of Defense said, no, don't declassify it, and you did it over their objections. They'd probably resign. How it looks better when you fire them and do it anyways, who knows? This is Trump logic. Definitely, Charles, there's a risk, always a risk with any president or high-level individual. I think the risk is mitigated here by his ability to retain that information or care about it when he's out tweeting 20,000 times a day on. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.